Well, howdy, everyone, and welcome back to Threat Watch, the 15-minute or so podcast from Lumifi Cyber, where we're going to talk about some of the news of the week and try to make it make sense, or at least try to talk me off the ledge with some of this stuff.
Both of which
Today,
sounds
I'm with
very optimistic, Mike.
yeah. Hey, John Luke, you are director of incident response. You have lots of stories you can tell. We're not going to tell anybody today some of those things, but I think coming up we'll do a Threat Lab Live where you're going to anonymize an incident or two that you've responded to. John Luke is actually a fabulous guitarist. Are you coming to the studio anytime soon?
I would love to. I got to get unburied from everything that's going on right now, but it is very much on my mind. I don't even have time to play at home right now. It's just jumping from one fire to another, man.
Yeah, well, you know where I am, right?
Tell me more.
Boston. So there are no drums here. Although, if you are unfortunate enough to be in the room next to me, you know that I travel with sticks and a pad, and that an ironing board is exactly the right height to play on that.
Does it resonate too?
It does a bit because it's an ironing board. Okay, all right. Let's dig into some of the events of the week. First, I think we ought to talk about this Coinbase thing, okay? Because they got cybered. Customer
Hard.
information was stolen. Yeah, hard. They were extorted for $20 million that they say they won't pay. You been reading up on this?
A little bit, yeah. So, Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong came out and said in a social media post that criminals had bribed an employee's customer, I'm sorry, some of the company's customer service agents, employees
Mm-hmm.
of Coinbase. But these employees in particular lived outside of the US, and they ended up handing over personal data on customers, including names and dates of birth, and apparently partial social security numbers. Now, this information, if I'm following the particular football here with this article, this information was then used by the attackers to reach out to Coinbase customers and using that personal information about them to say, "Hi, we're Coinbase. We're calling with questions about your account, or there's suspicious transactions here. We just need you to answer a few questions for us, or install this little program." Whatever it was that they did, this got them into these Coinbase customer accounts, where they've then also been able to steal a bunch of crypto from people's wallets, in addition
Yep,
to stealing a bunch of data about a bunch of customers.
this is true. And I read there's at least one person I know of that lost $2 million. And he's an artist, and this was, basically his retirement nest egg. So Coinbase does say that they're going to pay people back if they lose money from this. And what they're suggesting here, and I don't know how they went through the math, but they're going to write down as much as $400 million, somewhere between 180 million and 400 million. All right, this is
Oof.
what they say in an SEC filing. So their risk management people are trying to figure out everything that's going to come after this, the civil litigation, the SEC regulatory oversight, all of that stuff. And interestingly, so no ransomware, just a subset of customer records. And what they've done is they didn't pay the $20 million extortion demand, but they did say we're offering a reward of $20 million for information that helps to apprehend the perps. Now, I I don't know that anybody's going to roll over on somebody like that, but I think the interesting thing to me here is, and this has come up a couple of times lately. There's kind of this transition moving away from ransomware and more about just records theft and the threat of making those records public because of the class action that follows that. And so criminals know our laws and they use that as leverage. And I think that's, really kind of what they were doing here. Because if you just took a subset of customer data, okay, you make that public, yeah, that's going to get real bad. Extorting the customers or stealing the customers' money individually, extorting, what's the other one is Power School. Individual schools are now being extorted from that, right? They made those records public, but this is getting to be a bit of a trend we don't like to see. Speaking of getting hacked, getting cybered, this one is troubling because the three retailers that were almost simultaneously hit in the UK, right? Marks and Spencer, Harrods, which are both department stores, and Co-op, which is like a Whole Foods, okay? Now, reporting is that about 10 retailers in the US have been targeted, and they've all had some level of impact. And remember, they don't need to report that stuff immediately, but if they're publicly traded, they're going to have to soon. All right. And I'm hearing that this is our scattered spider friends. What do you think about this?
I think this one's interesting because you can see the groups as they pivot around. I mean, Scattered Spider, if I'm remembering right, these are the folks who hit MGM and Caesars last summer or
Yep.
thereabouts. They're, if I'm following the reporting, they're teenagers, 20 somethings. They were based in the U.S. and in the U.K., I think. So, I mean, that tells me that they're looking at targets nearby, stuff that's in quote unquote visual range of them, or at least they've got some
Mm-hmm.
insight to. Maybe even that lends some credence to insider threat or having actual physical access to the sites themselves. And so if I'm understanding this process here, they're socially engineering help desks to get user passwords reset.
Yep.
And then they're going so far as to threaten physical violence to get people to give up passwords. There's also reports of employees being bribed. So yeah, these guys are taking the cyber realm and bringing it IRL, as it were. I mean,
Yeah.
cyber attacks we think of as being things that happen at a distance. Oh, my network in Florida got hacked by people over in Russia. Well, all right, there's a world between those. If they're threatening violence, if they're doing stuff in person here, they're bringing cyber home. And I think that should be cause for everybody's concern.
It is, right? They have proximity. So, if somebody's on the other side of the world, they can't throw USB sticks in your bathrooms.
Yeah.
And and so, these guys operate in the US and the UK. And I read recently that they've gotten so violent in the UK that they've actually been pulling people out of car trunks who have been thrown in there after being doused with gasoline.
Ah,
Okay. So this is getting way different here. I've read that the retailers that are dealing with this in the U.S. are not mom and pop stores, right? These are large brands, but they're not naming them, right? So is it the
mm,
Walmarts and the Safeways? We don't know, and they're not saying. We might see some information coming out in 8K filings because, again, right, if they're publicly traded, they're required to do that. Um, you know, for consumers, you know, your vigilance is going to be really critical. You're going to have to update passwords if you have passwords on retail sites. I have a Walmart login. I'm going to change that. Um, and there is probably another shoe to drop here, and we're hopefully not going to see the same thing that they've seen in the UK, where store shelf for co-op, that it's a grocery store, like it's kind of like Whole Foods. They got empty shelves in some places. Their supply chain just is completely broken down from this, and I think they've actually closed some stores. you know,
yowza.
we'll see. Like I say, if it comes out in 8K filings, we'll see them right away. There are attorneys and journalists looking for that stuff continuously now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, definitely good reason, like you say, to tighten things up. Make sure that you got multi-factor turned on for all of your users. Make sure that it's enforced. Make sure that you're watching VPN connections and you know where
Hmm.
they're coming from. And there's the correlation work that has been done over the last decade to match up. Is somebody badging into an office versus are they signing in from China? Hugely important around this time.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, I'm gonna soapbox a little bit here. So you better buckle up. So HSCC, the Health Sector Coordinating Council. Okay. They have a cybersecurity working group, and they wrote a report talking about challenges in securing rural healthcare. And these come from a limited workforce and expertise, outdated systems, inadequate funding, all the things we know, right? You didn't need a new report to tell us that. But they urge both the government and the broader healthcare community to invest in workforce development, financial support, strategic partnerships, okay? All right. We've seen how many of these reports we've seen? Lots of them. Okay. But the things that bugs me is this key quote from the Rural Collaborative, which represents 28 rural hospitals in Washington state, already stretched too thin, experiencing increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks. Our hospitals will not be successful at protecting the nation's people without government support. Well, Rural Collaborative, I don't know if you read the EO, but the government ain't going to be there. And Lumifi Cyber, through its newly acquired company Critical Insight, has a very deliberate focus on critical infrastructure at the local scale. That's rural health, public utilities, local government, and more. We're a preferred provider of managed detection and response for the American Hospital Association. We've partnered with about 6 state hospital associations, and we're part of the AHA initiative to provide discounted and free services to rural healthcare, just like Google and Microsoft are. Okay? There's a collection of, 12 companies. We're in there. I spoke at AHA Rural in February on no-cost and low-cost security solutions for rural healthcare. I founded the Pisces Project, which does no-cost cyber monitoring for local government and rural healthcare, with hundreds of university students acting as your analysts as we build the workforce that we all need, including you. So we're going to call you. Let's see if there's something we can do to help you out, because this is what we do. The government ain't going to be there. Okay. All right. All right. Sorry to rant like that, but we're in Washington State. They're in Washington State. I've made so much noise about this stuff. I can't believe they're not reaching out to us. So we're going to reach out to them.
We've clearly not been making all the right noise in all the right places.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry for that outburst. Not really. Okay.
Well,
all
you
right.
said your piece. That's all right.
Yeah, I've said my piece. All right. So we got to close this thing up because it's late here, right? I'm in Boston.
Oh yeah, you're East Coast, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so what can we do to leave something for everybody that's a little less ragey?
Well, okay. So this isn't going to be funny, but I think it speaks to the times that we're living through right now. So the article is called "Welcome to the Age of Paranoia as Deepfakes and Scams Abound." All right. And it talks about on LinkedIn, all of the kind of weird reach outs you get from these slightly touched up headshots of a real person, right? There's AI generated facsimiles out there. Deepfake videos are getting so good that there's actual job applicants that are being hired based on deepfake videos, right? We've read a lot about that. These kind of scams, these fake employment scams, tripled from 2020 to 2024, and they're talking about losses that have gone from $90 million to $500 million. Okay, so we've reached the point where, as we say in our security awareness training, that communications cannot be trusted. Not email, not text, not voice, not video. The internet has been weaponized to sell to you, steal from you, and manipulate your opinion. It's really good at doing that last one. So we can't rely on Congress to do anything about it. So the article is right. It's the age of paranoia, especially for me, obviously. Okay. All right. I don't know if you want to tie that off, but
Sleep well, everybody.
I just don't like this direction that we're going. When we get closer to the election, we're going to be so awash in fakeness, right? And remember, there's those cognitive biases that we have that help the criminals, right? With the phishing bait and stuff, right? Well, one of those, right? There's all of these, there's authority bias, there's, confirmation bias. I want to be told things I already believe. And so if I get something like that, I'm going to be willing to share it. I'm going to be willing to believe it, okay? And I read an article today about how it's possible now to, at scale, create very tailored individual messaging, disinformation for people who are about to go vote that will pull on whatever pathology they have that will get them to vote a certain way. And it can be done at scale and very quickly. So that's where we're going. It's not funny, but that's what I'm leaving us with. Okay.
And on that
All
note,
right, we got to get out of here. So don't forget to sign up. Infosec Insider Daily News Blast. If you get it, you've already read all these articles. You know all about this. Watch our site for events, including monthly security awareness training on the last Friday of the month. John Luke, see you later. Let me know when you can stop by the studio. I'll get some other folks in there. We'll jam.
looking forward to it. Air
All
guitar.
right. Later, man.